how to, because this conversation is going to be a lot about world building, but like how do you tie in, you know, some of these interesting world building technologies with efforts to actually kind of restore landscapes, and can those things kind of serve each other? And anyway, I'm curious about that now, but no, I love it. I think it's great, and I love that your dad is, you know, like super tuned into legacy right now, and
Yeah.
you know, and I'm super. I want to like hold this like, oh, maybe our visit in March and maybe this whole project and you talking with him about it has kind of just sort of guarded and stewarded that little flame that he has. So John Anderson, I want to real quick just introduce you to Jenny by saying
Aloha, Jenny. Aloha, Dan.
aloha,
Hey, and
aloha,
Kayla's here.
and Keala
Oh,
goes at the
Yeah,
back.
and
absolute
got a,
pleasure.
Oh,
we
look
got
at
Banksy.
I made a laser banks.
Kayla made some. She got
Oh,
some
Banksy's got a
protection
lay
going on
on.
here. Sorry, I'm in my bathing suit. Sorry, it's Hawaii. I'm sorry.
John gets it. John gets it.
I'm wearing wool. It's cold here.
Oh
Oh, where
no.
are you?
Yeah, I literally got back. I came back from celebrating my mother's 75th birthday and drove
Yeah.
through snow twice, you know,
John.
just to get back home. Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
ready for
gosh.
sun. It's ridiculous.
We need to get you over here.
Yeah, I'll be swimming here soon.
John's in Idaho actually. Jenny had Jenny spent some time in Idaho too.
We live there.
Oh, wonderful.
Sun Valley.
Oh.
Where's Idaho for John?
I'm up in Moscow, Idaho. So I'm a professor at the University of Idaho. So, but yeah, I know the Sun Valley and the Ketchum area quite well. I grew up in the kind of the Boise area. So yeah, my backwoods have been, yeah, the Frank Church and getting lost on the Salmon River and lots of outdoors out here.
That's awesome. Our family, my two brothers-in-law bought about 24 acres in Colville, Washington. So, and I had a friend who went to that university, I think. Yeah, he's in Seattle now. But
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, he was in IT. We used to work together because I work for Aspen Skiing Company. So we used to work together there. Now he's working IT something or other in Seattle. Big surprise, right? Yeah, but nice area. He really, you know, liked that area. So I have a vague idea about where Moscow actually is. And there's Koa. So we've got, oh my gosh, no. Last time.
So one of my favorite things about John about Future Navigators is that, you know, Jenny and her ohana represent one team of about 15 that were participating from across the state. Most of them who are going to have to obviously tune in to a recording of a conversation, but like it's real kind of family based. And I had the chance to go. Jenny's family, the Kalahui Ohana, is based over in West Maui, and there's a very beautiful and important reef ecosystem off the coast of West Maui, especially Olevalu, where her family's from and where she largely grew up. And it's like Sylvia Earle, it's like been named as a hope spot. Like it's this really beautiful and important reef. And their family has sort of deep connections, long time, you know, generational connections. So I got to sit there with them on this beautiful beach with like reef tip sharks swimming around us and whales breaching right outside the reef, and listen to Jenny's father tell Keala stories about what is like growing up there and what he hopes to see in the future. And so we were just talking about, at this stage in our program, we're thinking about what sort of like regeneration campaigns that integrate some technologies that we've been playing around with and getting introduced to and familiar with, maybe or maybe not. But in terms of the technologies, but like what can we do to kind of build on our understanding of the genius of these places? So that gives you, actually Jenny's ohana and their hui is a nice sort of description of like, okay, these are the kinds of communities. Sometimes they're like community organization based, family based, school based, but in all cases they're kind of operating in a real similar way and intergenerational way. So
I love hearing that. I mean, not to go away, but that's where I'm excited with the technology we're at. You know, it's a different form of reality capture, and it's what our thoughts are. It's what our family's thoughts are. It's what we can share. It's who we are in the landscape, not what people are saying the landscape is, right? And it's a different way of telling the story. And so many ways, I think what we can, you know, as we start to blend into this new reality, you know, it's a Web 3.0 world we're going into. It's coming from kind of the heart, if you will, first, and it can be shared with people as trust networks are established and things are there. I'm not saying it should always be open and everything's free and good, because it's, you know, we know the exploitation of it, but it comes from the heart, right? When it comes from the heart, it can be shared, and you know, and especially it can be shared with multi-generation. And that's the thing that's really intriguing right now, is elders talking with their children and the youth talking, you know, and time almost doesn't matter anymore to some extent, because they can be captured, right? And so it sounds like you're already having it. You know, you don't need technology though, right? As you know already, you can throw the computer out the window immediately and still have these experiences, right? And still have story, and still have love, and still have community. But it's something different when you share that outside of our own little circles too sometimes, right? And that does
Totally.
tend to that's well, that's why I'm in education, right? That's why I think that's why ultimately it's education and
I love it.
communication and sharing. So yeah, I'm already into it. I'm digging it.
You're already getting me excited, and Jenny, you'll appreciate this too. One of the factors in this conversation is Oluvalu is, um, you know, some people would say under threat of development, some people would say under opportunity of development, maybe sustainable development is a possibility. Um, but it's, you know, prime real estate, like Jeff Bezos is moving in down the street. Like a lot of people want to be in this beautiful place. But I'm thinking, wow, like what if we just captured, you know, some of those trees, Jenny, that you're talking about planting, some of those Milo trees, for example, and we captured those in 3D and we populate a landscape. It's like, this is what, Dad, is this what you're talking about? Like if we had, and you take the Oluvalu landscape, but you repopulate it with a lot of those native trees, just to tell a story, just to say, hey, to the developers in the community, to the, you know, to the elders in the community, to the kids in the community, is this the future, right? Like when your dad was asking Keala, like, what future do you want for Oluvalu? And then, you know, it's going to take generations to build that in back in, like, right? You're not going to like restore, reforest, renative landscape a landscape in a year. It's going to take, you know, a generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, longer than that. But you could provide kind of this glimpse of this of what this world could look like. And I think that to me is like so when I imagine this, just to get at the heart of this, especially for those who are watching the recording and like, I'm still confused about how we might incorporate technologies into these like campaigns or action plans, innovation ideas that we have. Like I could see one campaign being like, let's try to capture a native tree in Polycam and create like a 3D model of this Milo tree and see if we can just get a decent capture of it, because it's pretty, actually it's not that hard to do, but getting a good capture of the tree that you'd want to use in a, you know, in some sort of storytelling world, and it takes some effort and some learning, and then but once you get that, it's like, oh, now you have that tree, now that model belongs to you, and now, you know, we take further steps to kind of incorporate it into a world. So I think the tree planting idea is like the perfect campaign, and I think there are like other little sub campaigns that might effectively integrate, you know, and I know Keala and Cole both could, you know, could totally jam in a Unity course and like learn how to kind of build out Oluvalu in Unity, and, you know, add some of these models that they've gathered themselves, or
Well,
kind of
now.
cool.
And that's like all about planting new trees to help
Oh, sorry.
restore it.
Kale is talking about
Kolave.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right next to Maui.
Yep.
And like the whole thing there is like restoring it. And I think that'd be like a fun thing to volunteer at, to get a feel, because their whole thing is about like bringing back what was there before and I thought that was really interesting. We were learning about it in my civics class, and
Oh, I love it.
they have like volunteer things, and I love like they're not like necessity, but I love how they always like ask if they can be accepted into the place, like with the Oli and stuff. I love when like you have to do that and you have to ask to be released. And I think that's like a really important idea of respecting an area and like showing.
I know you're interrupting your sister though. Okay, go ahead.
I forgot what I was going to say after that.
Oh, that's beautiful, Kayla. I think one, I think Ko'olave would be another real like and thinking about like, you know, one of the nice things, and John can speak to this with much more expertise than I can, but one of the nice things is that once you do start building these worlds, extending them, right? Once you've built kind of a foundation, kind of extending them or adding elements to them, I don't know if it becomes easier, but once you have that foundation built, right? Like there's ways to kind of use what you've already built to create new things, because digital assets are just like that, right? Like you can copy and paste things essentially. You can, you know, delete things. You can sculpt things a little bit differently, and so it would be such a cool vision. Ko'olave, right? We've the ohana, the various ohana that have been protecting that island and restoring that island for multiple generations now, right? They know that that work is going to take them another few hundred years. But if they could show the rest of Hawaii and the rest of the world why they fought so hard to get that island back from the United States military, because they can show that, no, this is a rich place, an abundant place, an important place, a sacred place. And you could even, like, when you mentioned protocol, I was like, oh yeah, how do we create kind of those protocol, build those into these stories too, so that the same element of a place being sacred in the real world lives also in the digital world, so that it's, you know, the word kapu, like when there's kind of kapu placed on something, a certain protocol or restrictions or sort of sacred designation, that should also exist even in the digital world. And one of the reasons I invited John today is because he's worked with a lot of indigenous communities, and he works with another friend of ours named John Waterhouse, on really thinking about and valuing and exploring how to honor these indigenous perspectives on what is sacred and what is like a real relationship with place and objects and all these kinds of things. So John's a really awesome bridge between what we value on the what we all value, including John, on the sort of sacred side of things, valuing life and heart and community and aloha, and understanding like how can the technologies serve that rather than how do they erode it, or how do they, you know, get in the way of it. So
That's
yeah,
kind.
this is cool.
That's kind, Dan.
No, it's true.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, we need to throw it out the window. Technology, you know, humans come first. Well, the environment, the humans, and, you know, Gaia. You know, we start there, and then if technology can serve, it's great. But I like where we're going with it. So with the Coeur d'Alene, I can share real quick. You know, and part of this is just sharing best practices between communities, because every community has their own story to tell it in their own way, right? And with the Coeur d'Alene tribe in particular, there's a lot of interaction needed within the participants. So sign language, like yes, and what type of language is needed needs to be incorporated. So we're looking at gesture and movement as well. And dance is also important. We've talked about that as well, right? And you can start to capture that, and everyone builds these worlds themselves. But we're starting off right now with just 360 videos, or not, 360 videos, and images that the students are taking out in the landscape. We're bringing in virtual worlds for them, and bringing everybody to kind of these classrooms. So my mind's already going into planting trees together, and starting to tell and label what are the stories. We deal with the red cedars is quite sacred around here, and so how are the textiles? It takes 6 years to strip the vertical strips of the red cedar to make the textiles for the hats and the clothing in this region, and how to make a canoe from that, and how the ancestral spirits of the salmon still are contained within inside of that tree too, right? And all of that's embedded with this tree through story first. And then, like you're saying, Dan, is polycam, so we can do quick scanning of it, photos of it. But then eventually it starts to go into the Unity worlds, starts getting in the gaming worlds, and our children start to create those worlds, and then they start to embed those relationships. So when we, just like you're saying, paint our future of what we want to see, that's a reality. It's something that we can all share in and start to see what it looks like. No, it's going to take us quite literally hundreds of years. I'm with you. Like, we're in this area of Hangman's Creek, but on our side, a success story that's happening is, Hangman's Creek is a tributary of Spokane River. It's a horrible reason why it is named that. We won't go into that now, but ultimately in the Columbia, and for over 10,000 years, salmon have been swimming freely and providing nutrients to all of the earth up here. Then the dams came, and for the last 100 years, we haven't had a salmon in Hangman's Creek until this year. The Coeur d'Alene tribe introduced 540 salmon. They're all tagged. You can actually see these as they're going over the river or the dams. The project, you can't get restoration effort until you have data, so where they're generating the data themselves, right? So now they're telling that story, they're creating these XR worlds that we're saying, and starting to show what the next 150, 200 years will look like, not what it's like now, right? And so they're really taking ownership on it. It's just beautiful to see, right? But they're telling it in the way they want to tell it. And I think that's what I'm hearing here too, right? It's just like, how can we, I'm a virtual architect, so we never build anything, we just create blueprints. So I'm here as a friend to help, establish blueprints and best practices of what we've learned. I already love the story already.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I'm excited to, spend a little bit of time, even just the next half hour or so, really kind of understanding in more detail, kind of what are some of those kind of first steps or actions or next steps or actions that our different participating hui could take, and what might those end up looking like, because we're in the process of, we're thinking of them as campaigns or little kind of innovation actions that will move us in this sort of regenerative path forward and align with these bigger visions that people sort of feel in their na'au and their hearts and have been speaking about with their hui and their families and their communities. But what's something that's just kind of like, what's the next thing we can do, right? So we have this beautiful vision from Jenny's father of like, we want to plant all these native trees across the landscape. That's awesome. And we want to support like movement in that direction. But like, what's one thing that we can do? And so for example, I kind of heard you say, well, like, oh, we can capture some nice 360-degree video, which we've done a little bit of practice with that. With Keala and the crew when we were out there in March, but doing some more of that while we're actually planting a few trees or something like that, and then seeing what those assets look like and how those can communicate about what we're doing. And so yeah, I'm excited to sort of dig in. I also want to let sort of Jenny and Keala and Koa jump in and share. We do have other hui who are working in other landscapes. I even do have there, as it's like graduation season. May is such a busy time. One of our families, the Ohana Iokepo Guerrero, their two children, Maui and Lilia, both Maui's graduating high school. Lilia's going to be a sophomore next year. They're building out in Unity a game they call Ahupua'a, using actual terrain maps and bringing in like models of everything ranging from chickens and pigs to new trees, coconut trees, and trying to create their own models of kalo, of the taro plant that they can, and of lo'i, whole kalo fields that they can try to bring into that model. And in the beginning stages of learning how to do some of this stuff in Unity, but those are the kinds of things that people are thinking about trying to do. That's probably one of the more ambitious projects that we have, but it's mapping. We have one group on the Big Island that really wants to map the impacts of the most recent eruption, and trying to think about what are some creative ways that we could engage in telling that story of a community's resilience and recovery and response to that. So there's a lot of different, it's super diverse set of potential campaigns and projects that have been born out of all the communities, but so we can try to speak to as many of them as we can think of, but it's really, I think this one, working with Jenny and Keala and Koa is kind of, I'm so glad they jumped in, just because I think, this is kind of a sweet spot that I think might apply to a lot of different groups.
Well, I'm jumping really quickly on this. You see a few things I might be able to help with. One is definitely, well, I've got 12 Gear 2s, and I think John wants me to ship a couple of them to you here too. So at least we can start up that XR environments and we can share some of what's happening with Link. The Unity projects really intrigue me, and as it's going. I'm speaking to AWE here on June 1st in Santa Clara, and I'll be having dinner with John, I believe the CEO. I spoke to the Unity as a company. They have a grant called Unity for Humanity that I actually think that what we're having as a conversation, we should just put in for. That will give the children and everyone, and us full access to Unity and to develop what we're talking about, restoration of the island, you name it. What it would do is provide for that kind of working group to launch it. And I think this is exactly what they would like to help with. I'm also part of the Sustainable Development Network. They're also coming on board here too with some grants. So I think, part of it is dream it. Like I always say, the design comes first. So you follow your heart, and then finding how the support is for those visions is a lot easier, right? And I'm already got the hook well into my lip on this one. So reel me in however you feel it's needed.
Awesome. I love it. You're always willing to support and dive in and teach cool things and join in cool things. So I appreciate it. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of where your mind is at, and Jenny and Keala and Koa, you guys jump in at any time with questions or ideas.
Can Koa share something real quick? He's like chomping at the bit to show this to you guys. I'm sorry. Okay.
Koa, let's see it.
Yesterday, these people came to my school.
What's your school, Koa?
Okay. And they gave each kid this poster.
Oh, here, you gotta hold it still. What is it? Red Hill? Yep.
Shut down Red Hill.
Shut down Red Hill.
Water is life.
Water is life.
If you want to take a picture, you can print it because there's a QR code.
Where's the QR code? Show me the QR code. Is the whole thing a QR code? Oh, you're right. There it is.
So take the picture if you want to do.
I love it.
The website.
If you want to
take it, Koa.
Yeah, water is life, huh?
I've seen that poster somewhere else, maybe at Purple Maya. Yeah, Uncle John wants to get a good photo, so you got to hold it up again.
Yeah,
Can you hold it up again? Good job, buddy. See? Everybody shares. Okay. You need help? Here, let's see. You got to get it in the frame, kind of. Here, hold the bottom. Hold the bottom. Get the water is like there. This is like drive-through Zoom, and there's the QR code down there.
Oh, there we go. Oh, up a little higher, just a little higher.
Up a little higher, a little higher. Up, other way, other way.
Got it. Other way. I can't see. Where is it?
There it is.
You got him? Still. Yeah?
Maybe.
I got it.
You did?
Yeah, Zoom. That's my first time I've ever had. That's my first Zoom camera.
I love it.
Wow, that's awesome.
I know. Yeah. Sometimes you got to do things on the go, right? So that's just the reality of life. Thank you for sharing that.
Koa, it's actually super, super important that you shared that, because another thing that I really want to help use Unity and XR environments to help myself and the world understand and Hawaii understand is, how do we visualize our water when it's underground, but it's so vulnerable, and we see that people are mistreating it and not taking care of it, and we know we can't live here in the islands without it. And so how do we visualize our water system and what it's become over the last 100 years or 150 years, and then what it needs to what it needs to become over the next 150 years, because it's a real threat. If you speak to many Hawaiians, they feel it as an existential threat. They're losing, making it hard to survive. Yeah, it's making it hard for them to survive as a people. And if you're taking this water and pouring toxic chemicals into it, and and they know that that's precious, that it takes generations to return that life-giving water back into the ground where it can be protected. So anyway, Cole, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think another question I have is not just how do you visualize the future, which is unseen, and not just how do you visualize the past, but really how do you sort of move into, how can XR environments help us move into these kind of invisible spaces? And I've seen XR used, for example, to like give you an inside tour of a cell, right? Or of like a circulatory system. So I can go into somebody's bloodstream and into their heart through virtual reality. But how could we also do that into, the aquifer and water and lava tubes and water system here in Hawaii? So I have no idea how to do that, but John probably does.
Yeah, I'm chopping at the bit saying, yeah, absolutely. We've got what? Sorry, Jenny, go for it.
No. Can you like show? Well, my whole thing with this whole tree thing, I mean, maybe this is not just my project, but maybe you can help explain, not my project, but our family's project, that like, how do those trees work with like the salt water and that? So if you guys are talking about circulatory system, I start thinking about like how those roots are and how they're making those nutrients and surviving in those. Like, can you show how that works? Because I'd actually be interested in how that whole system, being like a non-scientist, more humanities person most of my life, how that all works would be interesting to me for sure. So yeah, is that possible, John?
I'm jumping out of my skin. I'm loving this conversation. But this is exactly kind of the goal of Link, what we're working on, which is this coevolution of knowledge, of when we bring landscape and people and communities together with some Western science, and we just kind of look at what we learn from it. Absolutely. And so Dan, you're hooking me on the groundwater in particular. Most of the work I do is decision supports on landscape scale. It's not as sexy as games and all these other things that we gamify, right? It's hardcore science, what's on the landscape. And we have slicers in Southern Idaho. Groundwater is critical. So we're running model runs on what the snowpack is on there. And then we create these slicer tools, we call them, across that same landscape that the children are using in Unity. And it extracts what the groundwater looks like, right? And if there's contaminant, and so what it is, it evolves naturally into these tools when the community says this is important for us to understand or reveal. That's what we need, right? So now you have the community-based science question that we just turn on the lights to essentially reveal. And yeah, like the tree structures, that's a project, absolutely. When we look at up here in the Pacific Northwest, the fungal structures that, and the root systems, and trees are water pumps. They're wonderful water pumps. And what they're finding in Perth, Australia too, on some of that, as they've been trying to revitalize their landscape, is they're actually creating micro climates on a very large positive scale, right? Just understanding trees as water pump, and there's an engineering and a strategy of why you would use that in certain ways. And when we gamify it, I created a game for 8th grade girls in particular that was focused on some STEM, but we did water and science, where you had to create heat. So the only way to create heat was BTUs with trees, but you also had water quality. And so they had to understand, how do you manage a source that, you can't have the best answer either, right? And so you get communities and people all kind of chewing up these wicked problems together. We create those solutions. And this is why I'm in research and doing what I'm doing with at the university is once we get to these questions, we have a solution for it. I mean, in what I do, it's literally anything your mind can come up with, we can simulate. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing to say, but it's the truth. You have a lot of fun there, but there's a huge responsibility there though too, right? Like to me, that's the one area I don't want to go into, because I'm afraid of what humans would create, right? So let's create the things that that's why I'm on the side of the coin that I'm at. So all this is there, and and that's where, again, it's what is the story that has to be told? How is it shared? Who are the people that are involved in it? What does the future look like? And then that reveals the science, and the stories. So But I start off, I do recommend starting off being, like I said, just 360 images, or even just photographs of the landscape. We create galleries, even have people walk around in virtual galleries and reflect on the image they see, because everybody sees a different image. And you start the conversation, and also kind of like this is leading us to, what about groundwater or subsurface water and environmental? Well, let's blend that in. And then the new gallery pops up and people say, hey, I just took a photograph with my phone today down there as well, and this is what my teacher said. And and that all gets captured, and then it gets refined, right? So we really just start a process of just kind of community building using XR, and then XR eventually enhances that story that we're all telling together into tools that you can take action on ultimately.
I love that because, and we're hoping to do the Future Navigators process multiple times. I'm looking at kind of trying to create kind of a full-time studio where youth can kind of opt out of school for a year to just go out and tell these stories and be in the landscape. And we're thinking about, we started with story maps, right? Very two-dimensional, but like, how do we capture a lot of images? How do we capture sort of a lot of the stories, just audio file? Like a lot of what we wanted to do with Jenny's father, Kale, and Koa's grandfather was just audio, right? Just listening to the stories that he was telling. But then, and a lot of that stuff, as you know, right, is stuff that's for the family. It's not for the whole world. So how do you sort of honor that in the process? And so it's super, super interesting to, to be thinking about, how do we create this flow? I like how you start where like really the XR environment, the so-called XR environment is, for me, it's still so-called XR environment. I know you actually build real stuff and you do real things, but then other people are like the metaverse, and then everyone's like, wait, what's that? We don't know what it is. But it's like this XR environment is a place for community building. I mean, and that resonates a lot with me. And then as it grows, you just get deeper into the story. And as there are things that more people are willing to share, and there's technologies that are becoming more accessible and familiar, and there's collaborations that allow further development, then over time, it just sort of organically deepens and grows into a more robust XR world where there's a lot of what we're talking about and care about and are living in our real lives and dreaming is manifesting itself in these XR and these digital environments as well. And I like that process, and I think it's important as we look to sort of where do we move forward with this process generally, and engage the community even further in this, kind of just remembering that this isn't really a technology training, it's a community building process. And because we get folks who are participating and go, how are we going to learn to do anything in 1 hour on XR world building? And I was like, we're not really, but we're going to express what we care about, and we're going to like come up with some ideas and maybe get some introductions. And so what you just said there, even though we didn't kind of plan that or script that, but is really beautiful, because it's just, of course we can create like real high resolution models of Milo trees that we're gonna replant virtually in some Unity world that represents Oluvalu, but really like at the heart of it is like, Ed wants to plant a bunch of native trees. Like, how do we just help make that happen? But then does it all kind of work together? Anyways, I think it's real resonant with the direction that I think our Future Navigators community wants to go. And so I'd love to know, like, I see you kind of playing around with your headset, and I see you like, I'm like, wait, is John going to show us something? Like, what's he?
Could, if I'm trying to make sure my battery went dead, so I'm charging.
Wow.
But yeah, I could share it over there for sure. We have that link world. The Coeur d'Alene worlds right now, I've got 7 different worlds. That's all going to be private for now. And we're going to be creating galleries with the students. And I think that's the big part of this. Similar with the work we did with the Basque in Southern Idaho. We had Jenny give you kind of a background. We did worked with the Basque Museum on all the boarding houses. The second largest Basque population outside of the homeland is in Sun Valley and southern Idaho. There's lots of communities down there. So we looked at their boarding houses and the network that was created around it. And then we started to do Google Earth at the time, but you could start to see over the years where the boarding houses were, who immigrated to the boarding houses and worked within the community. And then if anybody had information, they started dropping pictures of their great-great-grandmothers, and then all of a sudden a recipe of that same great-great-grandmother. And then all of a sudden there's this war story of what, and it starts populating with all this other data that we had to put hooks for certain families, but they were, now we've got ancestry.coms and everybody else, right, that's sharing everything around there. But it was an early network of trying to see what starts to happen on this, right? And it does start to self-generate, but you do need to make sure that some of those hooks are in there. And some of those, I'm kind of cautious on the cybersecurity, not to get serious on us too much there. But there are some things we can do just with the data that does keep it trusted is about the best way I see it, because we want trust within the communities. And that's kind of the thing with John Waterhouse, who we work with. Everyone who sits around the campfire with us is there for a reason, right? And then as that community grows, it grows and grows, and only some information is shared, because we're also dealing with mercury issues and large industries at a United Nations level to make sure that we're stopping the practices that are going on, right? So some of the data that's shared in these conversations around campfire need to be held, right? And it's not saying the same thing in this situation, but we just need to really protect sovereignty. And Dan, like with this is my goal in education, especially for the youth, is this is their typewriter, this is their telephone, this is the communication device for their generations, and to have them own it and but use it in the way they know is true to them, because VR is easy. I've spent my entire career in virtual reality, and I teach a VTD or a virtual reality intro class, and in 5 minutes, it doesn't matter who you are, I can show people how to create a VR world, right? That can be shared immediately. We're to that point of the technology that anybody can share their experience. And so we'll just see how and what those become. So again, I'm full soapbox. I could try and pull something up if there's time. I don't know what everybody's got.
No, I just get excited when you're playing around, because I know there's always cool stuff. But yeah, I guess I would love to kind of allow you and Jenny and Keala and Koa to kind of maybe think even specifically in their terms, which I'm sure will help those who do watch the recording too. Is like, what should we be doing? How can we move forward and with our campaigns, and not to, again, as you've heard John say, Jenny, not to be like, you have to do something with the technology, but even just kind of like thinking about it and dreaming it or scheming it up, I think adds value to the whole process. And I love this, even just the 360 camera stuff, because I know that's already familiar, and I'm like, oh yeah, we know how to turn that into YouTube VR, and we know how to, I can help get you guys have that stuff set up. And that would be even a cool campaign, is sitting under the shade of a Milo tree somewhere, and all the, like, that's already there, and like, oh, let's get that on video and share that, and be like, wouldn't this be great if we had this? And you can add layers of science and other things to it, later, and more questions. But anyway, I want to hand it over to you guys so that you can get out of this what you want. And Jenny, don't worry, like, John's really good at being in a headset and also being out of the headset. So you can just throw questions his way, and he takes both worlds in. I'm always amazed by that.
I don't even know. Like, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot going on there. Yep. It all sounds great. And I was just going to say thank you so much for putting out there that, like, I was like, when I heard my dad say that about, wanting to plant some trees, I really got like the kind of like a nudge and Olawale. I was like, you know what? The man wants to plant some trees. Let's plant some trees for him. I was like, okay, Dad, what kind of trees do you want? Like, yeah. Like, he has to help with like his, but I was like, all right, what kind of trees do you like? We will physically, go and do this. Like, my brother Chris, he'll dig some holes, and, but, really some of this, reaching the next generations and thinking about how these landscapes evolve as time goes on. I could see how, creating a world where people, can see and walk around in and kind of feel what that's like is, really beneficial, and I know I'm aging when it gets to be like, oh no, what's going on, but, but, getting comfortable and familiar and almost like speaking a language that my kids and, one day, down the line, like kids, and, that they're speaking and making that, relevant, because, that's the innovation to me. You talk to people where they're at, and what they want to do, too, and, making that bridge and that gap. And it feels like a bridge time of my life, like old enough to know a little bit or have some experience under my belt, but young enough where, I will literally go get my hands dirty. It's okay. I'm like, it's good. I enjoy that. So yeah, very, very cool. All right. Are we going to see something?
No, I want to.
Are you sharing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm sharing now if you're ready. So this is a link environment that we've just used a little bit. And I can kind of use it to explain. So I'm going to, forgive me, I'm going to keep everything on. I'm going cyborg on you here. So let me know. You should start to see something pop in.
Oh yeah, we do.
Okay, some photographs. Okay, so these are, I'll try and move slow. So I won't make you sick. So this is one of, whoops, let me get over here by the campfire. This is one of the VR environments that we use for John Waterhouse. And I'll hop over here a little bit further, excuse me. There's some trees, there's a lake, the Aurora Borealis. We work with a lot of Arctic communities. There's a little video on John's healing journey and some of the work he's done. I'll take you over to these portals here in a little bit. These are the 360 environments I was referring to. But in John's world, we've set up photographs of some of the people that we're going to be working with, Chief Augustine down Peru and Chief Slava from Yakutsk. And they're kind of, if you will, our campfire participants as we're dealing with issues in Peru, in particular with the Coeur d'Alene, or similar to the Coeur d'Alene is mercury and lead in the water issue. And you can see there's a little fire above there saying that when we go to their world, there's a pressing issue that needs to be discussed. John, we use in his traditional, there's the talking feather. So when you're in this room, whoever holds the feather has the floor. And so there's some protocol. Now, inside of this space, we can have up to 40 different people. And it does have spatial sound, which is nice because, when I have people in here, I can hear you right next to me. And even though we're thousands of miles away, on the far back, we have a lot of images we brought up with kind of more of the indigenous science that's embedded in landscape. So we talk about, these are actually water wells. The wind travels across the landscape and pushes the irrigation systems. This is down in Peru. This is a poisonous bird that, Western science, spent hundreds of years trying to discover, but, all they had to do is talk to their guide who, their people knew how it was poisonous for thousands and thousands of years, right? And there's other things in the environment that start to reveal. This is a rock down in Peru that was carved by the ancients of the ancients, if you will, when it was to be revealed. This is the tree of life. It meant you had to prepare your civilization differently. This has been exposed, for like a few decades now. But just kind of opens a safe space for us to have conversations. I'm going to hop over here real quick, and you'll see these little spheres. This is an idea. So this is Mount Idaho. And this is just a 360 image that was taken. The Nini Poo or the Nez Perce, Mount Idaho is a sacred hilltop that is, whoops, let me close down a few things. I was in here the other day giving a display and talk with the Coeur d'Alene. And you can see that we're up here in the peak, but what's important is down here in the valley, and you can see the urban expansion. We have some water issues coming in here as well because of the phosphorus of the agricultural lands. And there is a restoration effort culturally and environmentally that's taking place here as well. And so we literally start conversations in world, and these are all, street views that you can have from anywhere. I'll hop over here real quick. These are some of our participants. There's John again, and let me close this down. But in here as conversation, Saina, this is one of our participants. I'll see if you can hear it or not. You know, we share videos. I don't know if
I don't think the audio plays for us, John. But,
you might not be able to hear it. Well, her tradition, and when we were in New York talking in here, Saina, this is one of the blessings of the landscape. And so the Coeur d'Alene, they also have a tradition of drumming, and they got all excited that they could start to film their own drumming and display that in these spaces as well. But over here is another object I just brought in to give you some idea. So this is a Polycam 3D. My colleague will be upset with me. This is the fire lab. So a lot of what we're looking at is the fire research in this area. And this is the side of all the instrumentations. But I just, in like less than a minute, went around with my phone and did a quick scan. And you can see now, you know, we can share a pretty decent 3D environment and then bring these worlds in with us as well inside of these spaces, you know, and scale and shrink them as much as possible. I think within here, let me see.
You have all of the different native or indigenous people tribes on your what is that called? Virtual, what is this called? I don't know how to
So
I don't know where it is.
This is a project, Jenny, called Link, and right now there are folks from Alaska and
Kayla, not Jenny, but
sorry, Kayla. Kayla, yeah, there are indigenous communities that are gathered in this platform called Link, and it's growing and expanding. It's certainly not all or anywhere close to all, but it's multiple represented around this campfire. So.
Yeah, we try to give, so down in Sudan as well, John has some participants and we're starting to just use these environments. I think we're actively working with about 18 different communities. And so we're going to be sending to 6 communities up in northern Alaska and Yukon, and then off the Mackenzie River up in Canada here will be our next groups, and we're connecting them this next month. So there's lots of communities starting to kind of build these worlds for themselves, if you will. And then depending what it is, they kind of give nice spaces for people, and especially classrooms of students, to share what they've been working on. I'm excited for the end of the summer to share what the Coeur d'Alene children are going to be creating. It's going to be, you know, obviously it's going to be kept quiet for a little while, but we should be able to share that with everybody soon. So I don't know, it gives you some sort of an idea. This is a little lower level resolution of a world, but it's kind of where we start. But then the idea of the tree plantings, we can do the landscape on the Polycam as well. I may have, if I have a little bit here real quick, you'll see there's lots of files that you can bring in here. Essentially, Dan, once you use the Polycam or anything off the phone or any of the scans, what we use is just a shared Google Dropbox for everybody. And then anybody who has access to it can grab all the files. So any of the videos, any of the, like if there's any assets like a tree, that could all be shared the same. You know, and start to tag it. Yeah, this is some of the images and some of the work in Sudan that we're sharing right now when John was over there. I'm trying to get to some other, I don't know if.
But in that Google, if you had a bunch of object files or whatever 3D shape files, you could pull those up and open them up directly in the space.
Yep, exactly. That's where. Yeah, so you can share those. So yeah, if somebody's out in the field or someone's doing something else and they want to share immediately, you have a shared space, and then it's secured because of the website. So that's one of the first things I would recommend is, if there was a project to get started with it, is we'd create kind of a shared password protected space of a Google Drive. Actually works about the best, and it's pretty cheap.
Huh.
Yeah.
This isn't really related. I wanted to talk about this earlier, but with the campaign idea, what I've noticed in Uluwatu is that it's very dry there, and there's a lot of like brown, I'd say brown and darker colors that are more muggy. So I feel like if we added more like native Hawaiian flower trees, like I've been doing a project in my civics class, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's this purple flower tree, and it reminded me of the color taro. So maybe like taking like native Hawaiian trees that had more color to them also, rather than just like regular trees, and putting those on the highway, and to like maybe make people realize how beautiful the place is, because I think definitely people that have lived there have seen the beauty in it, but I feel like, I don't know if tourists would be like, they'd just be like, we're driving down this highway and there's ocean and sometimes whales, but I think like adding more of the beauty on the land rather than just the ocean would be a nice aspect to it. And I just realized I was muted that entire time.
No, we heard most of it, Kayla. And I love the idea of even like thinking back to the technology, right? Like how do we capture some photos and some, 3D models of some of this color of Hawaii that sort of really brings Hawaii to life, and of course we want those in the landscape wherever they belong as well, but also in this virtual landscape. I think it's compelling to think about, right? Like how do we add that richness of all that Hawaii is, including all the colors and everything else. I want to take a moment to just introduce Mark and Paige to you, John. Paige is one of our hui captain, one of our leaders of our participant groups from Puna on the Big Island, and Mark is a friend and a teacher from Oceanit. He's an engineer who has been working on a project called Aloha AI, among many other things, but bringing artificial intelligence to use in various projects across the state. So, and John, I know you're also familiar with applications of AI. We've spoke about that before. And but Mark, John was just sharing with us some of the really cool work in sort of XR world building and virtual reality environments.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Exploring some of those technologies.
Yeah. There's a reason why I brought the topic back up, so I didn't put into the conversation again. But I was thinking about the AI and how, like, when I asked the question about the tribes and stuff, I was wondering, like, I wonder if I feel like it'd be cool if we got the community together from all over Maui, and possibly even working up to like other islands if we possibly would. But I feel like it'd be cool to for people to send in their progression, like if they helped out with our campaign, or if we got people from the community, like the local community, to help plant the trees, and putting that into the AI to show people like from all over the world the work we're doing.
Keala, let me give Mark a little bit of background so that Mark can join us in this conversation, because I know he'll have lots of really good ideas, and it's also relevant because I was just working with local ea on a reforestation project design that they're working on, and we're also looking at a stream restoration, and we were talking a lot about artificial intelligence. And what we were doing is collecting drone images, because we need to provide tree counts which is what you're basically talking about, Keala, is providing progression. So looking at how trees are growing, how many more trees are populating a landscape. And so we've been using drone imagery on a couple of these other projects and trying to look at, can we train some AI systems? I've been working within ArcGIS to train those systems in sort of a native workflow. Mark has worked on developing other AI solutions for similar kinds of projects with counts and other things like that. So I just want to say, one of the things, Mark, that Keala is referencing is they have a project idea to do some native outplanting, some replanting of some native trees in West Maui, and they would, the idea Keala was just expressing was, how do we kind of track progress on that reforestation effort over time? And are there applications of, for example, of AI that might be relevant to that? So John and Mark, just so you guys know, from the participant standpoint, they're kind of experiencing two conversations today, but they're really nicely kind of bridging and flowing into one another on sort of XR environments and 3D environments, virtual reality, world building, and then also AI and sort of understanding data and getting insights from imagery and other sources of data that we might be getting on our landscapes and how those might tie together. John, I know it's getting late in Idaho, so if you are welcome to stay and continue, we can all just keep the conversation flowing. But also if it's getting late and it's time for you to sign off and go, we totally understand. And I have this recorded. I know the folks who are going to tune in on the recording are going to be really stoked. So yeah, I appreciate you guys, but just wanted to give everyone context. So sorry for a little bit of, we've got conversations moving, but Keala, you did a perfect job of helping us transition into now how do we incorporate AI into this big project as well? So yeah, I love it. But yeah, Mark, would you be willing to introduce yourself and a little bit of the work that you're up to?
Sure. How much do we have time? I will kind of adjust my stuff based on that info.
Yeah, I'd say we're the call is scheduled to go until 5 our time.
Okay.
And so you're welcome to but we could, I mean, I'm happy to keep learning with you for as long as you're willing. So
yeah, so I wasn't exactly sure who my audience was me, so I kind of put all everything into one big slide deck. So yeah. So we'll see. Just stop anytime. Ask questions, whatever. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, it's almost like one big movie. Okay. Okay. So, first, I guess I should introduce myself to you guys so that we can kind of get to know each other and what I do, and so that we can kind of know where we stand and if I'm useful to you guys. Okay. So, this one. So have you guys met again, Uncle Ian Kitajima, I guess? Have you talked to him? Has he spoken about Oceanit?
He has not. Ian, this Future Navigators crew has not met Ian or the Oceanit family.
Okay. So after this one, I'm going to talk about Oceanit a little bit. So this is where we are today. And oops. If you just move a little bit. And I work for a company called Oceanit Laboratories in downtown Honolulu area. What do I do? I'm a applied AI engineer, and I'm going to show you some demos of what I've done in the past. But I'm originally from Japan, as you might have noticed from my accent. As you know, where like Hello Kitty and Pokemon and sushi were born. And specifically, I was born in Sapporo, and where miso ramen was born. So I'm a little bit picky about miso ramen. There are a few good restaurants, fortunately, in Hawaii. And this is what I grew up with in. And we're going to zoom into the exact house I grew up in. So it's kind of residential area. This is where I grew up. My parents still live there. And I had a dream back then. I wanted to build a space colony. And I thought that would allow us to eliminate wars and save the planet back then. Just to give you the context, I was born in 1971, so that's about when I was thinking about in the 80s. And then I went to college there in Tokyo. I studied mechanical engineering. I did my bachelor's and the first master's. Basically, I wanted to study the kind of a mechanical aspect of space colony. So I was still serious. And then I came to the US in 1995, went to Cornell and switched my major from engineering to social sciences. And I wanted to kind of study how people could live in a closed environment, right? But kind of my interest shifted to something like complexity science. Yeah, so, so grown-up thing, meaning, I started to see somebody in San Francisco, and then, kind of, I forgot about my dream. Oh, hold on, oops. I don't know. And then somehow I ended up living in, getting the first job in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Being a foreigner, being non-Christian, being non-white, living by myself in Oklahoma was a very, very interesting experience. Very kind of, in a sense, mainland American experience. But anyway, so career-wise, I was doing kind of modeling, predictive modeling, forecasting, algorithm development for all companies. I don't know why I'm doing it. We'll skip. And then I moved to Tulsa, Southern California. I worked for a trading company, small trading company, because he's the one who basically saved me. And then I worked for a startup company in LA. I was still doing a predictive analytics, sort of data science, what we call today, I guess. There was no term data science back then. And then, midlife crisis hit. I wanted to do something totally different. That's exactly what happened, actually. So just wanted to do totally different. I did my Indeed search, and I found this postdoc position at UH. I should see. It's a definition of insanity, practicing. So I lived in Oklahoma. I mean, in the Big Island. And Paige, you might know my Facebook page back then. I created infographics about lava flow that was approaching a Pahoa town. So I'm the one who did the gold graphics and infographics. So I became kind of regionally famous. I kind of started to really feel attached to the island and want to stay in the Big Island and in Hawaii. So I got a job at Hawaii Airlines. I didn't like it. I didn't like working for a huge corporation, in a sense. But luckily, I met Ian, and then he saved me, and I'm really happy right now, career-wise. So
I'll share that part of the recording with Ian where you say how happy you are.
No, he knows. Yeah, he knows. Yeah. Yeah. So Oceanit is a small company, like 100 people ish. Majority of them, like 60%, 70% of PhDs in science and technologies. We get grants from state and federal agencies, DOD, DOE, DOT, lots of AI stuff and non-AI stuff, coating products and energy stuff, and so on. So what do I do now? So here's my some of the, like I said, I do applied AI. I mainly use, so I don't really low-level AI stuff. I mean, Google and the open source communities, and they make all those intricate stuff. So as an applied engineer, you can kind of use the open source projects to kind of create applications, something useful. Sometimes it's not always useful. My first example is a very impractical, not so useful, but fun project. Happens to be my favorite. So it's called Air Canvas. Basically, the AI will detect your fingertip and then let you draw things in the air like this. And you can erase what you have drawn using palms like that. So like I said, I can't think of any practical applications, but people love it. When kids come to our office and they play with it, that's the most popular application by far. But I am thinking about maybe making a network so that you can deploy this in one place, another one at a different place. Maybe people in remote areas can collaborate and draw on the same campus, maybe together or something like that.
John Anderson, I'm thinking, oh, we got to get this in the virtual environments and have people be able to draw in real time using gestures or connect with gestures in their own environments, and then have that live in those VR worlds. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, well, and Mark, getting you in there, I probably should have done it. We do have some of the sketching and drawing, but I think there's some editing there. There's real time. We've got the voice as well that we'll be able to work in there. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think Google has this thing called where they get a stick and then they draw things with a stick or pen, right? Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this one is actual work. Finally, right? This one is something we did for Hawaii DOT, Department of Transportation. They want to count vehicles and also classify types of vehicles all the time. We didn't develop hardware. We used the GoPro and then they kind of put together some hardware and run it for 17 hours. And basically, instead of doing sampling, we just counted every single vehicles at this intersection. And we did this for several intersections along Farrington Highway. We also have similar projects that are actually also going on. We are not using GoPro for that. We're actually using something like a trail camera, which takes some short video clips and send them to our FTP server. And it takes the video clips every 10 minutes, triggered by motion detections, and our clouds, and then basically our computer in office will pull those files and then do the same thing and actually estimate speeds as well. So we've done, and we are doing several projects for Hawaii DOT. So this is something we've done, and we're actually doing it still at a different location to monitor beach erosions. So again, this is a camera at the beach, and same time sends the time-lapse images. What this AI is doing is it's detecting, instead of a kind of a drawing bounding boxes, square boxes on objects that you detect, it's classifying each pixel. So it's basically detecting an area where a sand is not covered with water. So this algorithm is still kind of how we do with the data. It's still kind of something we're kind of working with it and developing, improving. But the AI part is this for now. And also, when we actually, the project that we're doing, similar projects we're doing, is we're actually combining this with the public data from NOAA, for example, and compare that to say, water level and stuff like that, something in a more scientific and controlled ways. But anyway, that's something where, yeah, sure.
I was just going to say, Jenny and Paige are, I'm sure, quite familiar with the issue, and I imagine John would guess that this would be an issue. But with a lot of coastal development, but also sea level rise, a combination of factors, channelized stream flow. So now you have different interactions with in terms of erosion effects with water flowing down. We're getting some communities that are really facing challenges with either sand accumulation or depletion. So it's becoming, we're not sure in Hawaii if the next wars of Hawaii are going to be fought over sand or water. It's one or the other. Probably water, but maybe sand. So it's I work with. I've been talking with a group that's hoping to do some work here in Hawaii, and they have an interesting technology that does some chemical conversions, takes a lot of readily available inputs like air and ocean water and also waste, and then has outputs like fresh water, and concrete is one of their outputs, but actually sand is one of those. Sand is really one of the initial outputs. And in Hawaii, they've said almost everyone they've talked to is, wait, no, we don't need more concrete. We want your sand. You can produce sand. We want your sand. So this sort of Sand Savers project is one that I was speaking a little bit with Mark and Ian Kitajima about last week, and excited to engage more communities in kind of exploring that.
Yeah. So I forgot to tell you guys. So yes, the current project for the monitoring the beach is actually a sand saver project. Our coastal engineer is trying to develop or design good sand savers that might work for Hawaii, and we're going to test sand savers here in Hawaii. First, 2 locations on the north side, and we're trying to kind of measure the effectiveness of those sand savers. So that's the project. What the project is about.
And Paige, I see your comment too that, understanding beach erosion, right, and looking at existing solutions to manage that and using AI to help us study the impact, like Mark's talking about. And at Pahuiki, that might be a really interesting place to deploy. It might be a little difficult to get the footage and everything else that was necessary, but definitely interesting. I know they're working with a couple different communities on Oahu, but it's issues affecting all of our islands. So yeah, super cool.
Right. Okay, so what's the next? Yeah, so this is one of the first AI projects that I was involved in. This is the actual video footage from Hurricane Harvey in Texas, 10 days after the hurricane hit. And this system detects healthy UTT poles, also damaged UTT poles like this. Basically, typically, it takes many weeks for the UTT companies or power companies to go out and survey and actually evaluate the situation. So the project was an attempt to make the time to make that assessment much shorter, basically.
Is that all drone footage after Harvey?
That one is drone footage, but towards the end of the project, we kind of shifted to it, and also drone in addition to ground assessment as well. Yeah.
Interesting. John Anderson, in some of your work, oh yeah, I love this one too, the Aloha shirt training. In some of your work doing kind of landscape, modeling and science and ecological modeling, are you guys starting to incorporate a lot of AI into your research there, John?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued with this. We're coming mainly the modeling. My question is on the phosphorus runout in particular. Most of what we're doing is dealing with red tide issues and bacteria blooms. Are you seeing much of that on the islands? Is that becoming an issue, or?
Not as far as I know, but really, because I think it's poorly studied. Like we have, for example, we have a cyanobacteria that grows in a place I work called Mauna Lua Bay here in East Honolulu. Every time we get a significant rain event, we get these massive blooms of this. It's called Lingbia, and it's I don't know how damaging it is, right? But it is a cyanobacteria. It does smother some of our native species because it kind of entangles itself and grows on top of them. It's kind of this like hair-like matting cyanobacteria. So it's definitely in competition with some of our natives that we're removing invasive algae to try to help native algae return. And so, the Lingbia is like, technically it's not invasive or non-native, but we're seeing these larger blooms, but we don't, like, it hasn't really been well documented or studied kind of exactly what's causing them. So, and not a lot of red tide issues, but yeah, I mean, that's similar, I guess. It's kind of similar to those issues and likely, driven by some of the same environmental factors.
Yeah, we've got, obviously different temperatures and something, but we've got ridge to river concepts, whereas ridge to reef in Hawaii is similar. But yeah, the AI kind of overlay. So what we'll do is it's called wet cloud. It's a sediment erosion modeling. And so any hill slope, so if once you get the vegetation cover and everything, that's all runs behind the scenes. And then if there's loss of vegetation, aka trees, in Idaho, where we've got a lot of clear cutting still in management, it's kind of an important thing to understand. We'll do drone footage, do the AI over the top to say what is being lost, and then run future model runs on what that erosion is going to do. And up here in our lakes, we actually in Fernan Lake have been closing it down for well over 100 days per summer because the cyanobacteria blooms release neurotoxins that will kill you in 4 hours. Once it gets to your liver, you lose entire elk herds to these blooms. It's a very serious issue that we're also starting to see up in the Arctic climate. So that's kind of the area we look at in water quality here. It was originally for more agricultural lands, but we've repurposed it to, down in Australia now, and we do a lot of post-fire as well. We're having a lot of fire effects. You'll get me geeking out on this one, but this is kind of those visualizations where you start to get the wicked problem, the wicked problem, the wicked problem. One thing we've discovered by running some of our simulations is that we have a lack of biochar in the soil because we're suppressing fires around urban environments. Well, without biochar, just like an aquarium, it's going to get filled up with bacteria. You got to have that charcoal as a part of to capture some of that. And so, it's bringing up really interesting modeling issues because of these questions that I led off with. But yeah, it's kind of a hybrid. The questions will lead us to the technology, right? And then how you layer the technology to solve that question. And Mark, this is awesome.
People like John and Mark, it's like, oh man, whoever likes complexity science and modeling and that, you guys are so smart that it's sometimes hard to keep up, but I love how you can bring it back to the land and real projects and also fun projects. I love that we can also have fun with some of these technologies too. Both of you guys are really great at that. So sorry, Mark, to interrupt, but
sure, no problem. But I just want to mention that when we talk about complexity sciences, for example, that's so relevant to, if I understand correctly, the cultures, indigenous cultures, where they often talk about the nature and how that works, how so unexpectedly work in a surprising way, stuff like that, or homeostasis of nature and the system, negative feedback, stabilizing feedback, fluctuations, and so on. So, I mean, it is about complexity science in a sense.
It is, yeah, absolutely. No, it's what we're trying to, in a lot of ways, with the Future Navigators project, which this is all part of this longer project to support communities across the state to engage in understanding what I've sort of borrowed a term from biomimicry and landscape architecture, this sort of genius of place, but to understand the genius of their places from an ecological and cultural perspective, so that we can leverage technology and tools to really design better futures and create, kind of reculture ourselves to fit into the landscape. And so all of these tools, I know that they're so incredibly important and powerful. And I also know that most people in the community are like me and don't know much about them or how to take advantage of them or how to utilize them for these purposes. They think they're just for games or for really high tech, like scientific or nerdy kind of things that people want to do. But it's like, actually, that's true, but it's also like, oh, we can all be playing in the space. And so the two of you being here today with us is, for me anyways, like just super inspiring and affirming that, yes, we can try to figure out how to use these things in our communities to take better care, have a good time, grow a culture and a community that appreciates the complexity of our places, and that is something indigenous cultures and communities did for a very long time, so yeah, it's cool.
It's something that they understand at intuitive level. So actually, let me skip some of the, this is something actually we did with students. A couple of students at KS Maui wanted some help with AI for their science projects. So they collected data and labeled data to build this model to detect, define incorrect ways of wearing masks.
Yeah. So for Jenny and Paige and others who are viewing the recording here, this was a group of students that had a basic model that had been developed by Mark, that they could train so that they would look at images or video and say incorrect, correct, incorrect, correct. And after you've trained the model enough times for long enough on enough images, now that model can just tell you right away. It's learned to recognize correct and incorrect. So it's something that like our communities can do. You think about the issue, you think about what's the thing I wanna know, this or that, and you can train, images to be able to do that. And for how many images did they have to train, Mark, for this to be a reliable detector of correct or incorrect.
So this model is not super reliable, but when they start, I usually ask them to collect something like at least a couple hundred images per class, per category.
Yeah.
Yeah, ideally more like 1,000 or a few thousand or more.
Yeah, so it's not insignificant. It's a little bit, you gotta get
Yeah.
a bunch of different images and you have to
Right.
label them. But you know, I'm working with local AL, for example, on the stream restoration, and they want to, and on this reforestation effort that's up Mauka, it's up the mountain in the same Ahupua'a. And you know, we want to do these sort of surveys, these tree surveys, and so we're just basically tree, not tree, kind of labeling pixels essentially, and maybe even doing squares, you know, trying to identify objects and labeling tree, not tree. So very basic stuff like that, and figuring out how to, you know, how to train systems and how much, you know, how many images we need to really sort of process. And but I love this sort of, you made the point earlier, Mark, about like applied AI engineer, right? Like a lot of these tools, you know, Google Tensor, like a lot of these, there's some open source tools.
Right.
They don't require, you know, communities to have some sort of program, you know, somebody who can really generate the sort of nitty gritty model. It's just taking already existing applications and algorithms and figuring out new ways to use them. And so I think that's for me, it's a big point because it's about accessibility. A lot of communities go, oh, I don't have a Mark down the street who is a PhD, or I don't have a computer science guy who's a machine learning AI, you know, data scientist. But actually a lot of the tools, the foundational tools are there that I think people can learn how to use these things and deploy them fairly quickly. So yeah, exciting.
Yeah. A smart high school student should be able to figure this out. And I am actually teaching 2 students to actually be able to become able to do this themselves.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
So that's just another project. That's for actually federal DOT. It classifies as rocks and measure the particle size and get particle size distribution. It's in a mobile app. Okay. So just a couple more points. So also, I forgot to include this demo, but also with the Koala Center in the Big Island, we've been working with the model to detect feral pigs, and also in addition to goats and deers, invasive species. Basically, the purpose is basically they are fencing areas that we want to protect, right? So they want to kind of measure the effectiveness of the fencing effort by counting number of pigs in certain areas before and after fencing. So that's something we've been doing. For that project, actually, we involved a couple of schools in the state, throughout the state, and asked them to kind of contribute the photos of the animals and asked them to label them. So we have a model that can detect pigs, goats, and deer, and a couple other things I can't remember right now. But yeah. So it's kind of nice to be able to kind of work with a different organization of kids and people in different areas, kind of ask them to contribute, right? And to build a smart system that we can use together.
It might have been right before you came in, Mark, but one of the things that John said that I sort of jotted down and just resonated with us in our project, and I think it connects to what you just described with the Kohala Center and that project, and really a lot of these demos is like it's about, in a lot of ways, about building community, right? It's about connecting a lot of people who might not otherwise be connected to these issues in real ways, or feel like they can support the science or engineering that's going to help solve these problems. And now it's putting in the hands of high school students, local nonprofits, community members, you know, and allowing them to collaborate to understand and make decisions about their own places, right? And maybe be less dependent on somebody else fixing our problem or somebody else making decisions about it. And so I think that's this idea that like technology should ultimately facilitate community building, I think is a really beautiful and interesting idea.
Right.
And
it could be a kind of unique problem certain regions have that the Googles and Microsoft will not sell, like, you know, detecting, say, chicken and roosters, you know, in your backyard.
yeah, Google might not invest in that, although they should.
Yeah. Okay, so just a few more charts for talking points, which kind of we're going to shift gears, and I think this is kind of important. I was thinking, I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know who the audience was. I thought there might be some students, but I think this would be kind of relevant among these, you know, we grown-ups and our community. So I was teaching economic geography at UH. Basically, how we came to be, especially around industrial revolution, colonization, and so on, productivity increase. So this is something some research in the UK put together. It's a GDP per capita over the years since 1000. So as you know, around 1800-ish, that's when capitalism and industrial revolution started to happen. And then productivity went up really, really fast, right? If you're just talking about average, this is great. You know, everybody should be rich and healthy and stuff like that. And around that time, this happened. Many innovations like solar, threshing machines, spinning jenny, power loom, cotton gin, steamboat, railroad, and the electricity stuff, communication, refrigeration, sewing machine, gasoline engine, telephone, and typewriter, light bulbs, camera, X-rays, right? Amazing number. We tend to think, well, internet was amazing. So many things happened, but it was really 200 years ago. That was really amazing, and just life totally changed. The important thing for us to think, especially for people in a place like Hawaii, I think, I have more. What happened was shift in the labor balance, right? Initially, everybody had to be a farmer for us to survive. But because of these innovations, we started to need less farmers. That basically released farmers, and they started to do something else, such as manufacturing and the services, right? Basically, innovations created new jobs. So that was great. And then eventually, those innovations actually caught up with the level of complexity for manufacturing. Then we started to need less manufacturing jobs. And yet still needed services, humans for services, because it's so complex. It's human interactions. So there's a theory when we talk about AI. There are people who are scared of AI because they might steal our jobs. There are other people, by looking at this history, no, there will be different jobs that we can even think of. The truth is, we don't really know. This AI thing, clearly, the AI will be able to do most of the humans can do technically. We're already seeing it. Maybe in 5 years, I don't think we'll see a lot of people when you order at McDonald's. They're already doing it. Call centers, technical support. So yeah, we might see some other jobs, but we don't know. That's the point. So it's possible. Basically, this time around, we don't have a new sector, clear area that our people labor can go to. So that's the scary part. So I don't want to scare people, but I think we should be aware of that possibility. And it's not about really technology. It's, I hate to sound political, but it's about votes, for example. And that's things that are not technology and AI that we need to think about to kind of be prepared for this new coming world. So.
I love that, Mark. I think that that message is, it's not, it is scary, but it's also potentially liberating.
Yeah.
Is that if our technologies can serve to bring us together, it can still, the technologies can work to help provide
Right.
resources and material, substance that people need to live without them having to, spend as much time and labor driving a economic engine.
Right.
Then, what do we want to spend our time doing?
Mhm.
And having those questions, those deep, important philosophical existential questions really are at the heart. How can, like we said, how can these technologies facilitate communities coming together, which is
Right.
ultimately what we're going to have to learn how to do. If we're all still fighting with one another over
Yeah.
over who's stealing whose jobs,
Right.
then we're going to be in trouble. So
Right.
it's really, really important. I love that.
Another trouble is that because of this, the phenomenon that we're seeing here in this chart, some parents tend to believe that their old ways will work for the kids, but that's not the case, right? So we gotta be careful what to tell our kids, and kids need to know that.
Yeah. It might be a very, very different lifestyle that our children and our grandchildren are going to be living into, evolving into, developing. Something
Right.
that doesn't look anything like signing up for a job and going to work until it's time to retire. It's likely going to be a very different kind of existence. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you making that point. And I think this program being called Future Navigators, for me, my hope is that it helps us not just prepare for the jobs of tomorrow, but to prepare for the lifestyle, the culture, and community of a generation from now, or two
Mhm.
generations from now, or 7 generations from now, so that we're restoring some of the health and resilience and abundance
Right.
of our culture and our ecosystem
Right.
now. Because if we're not planting those seeds, if we're not thinking about these questions that you're raising, then
Right.
it's gonna come fast, right? It's gonna
It's
come
gonna come.
a lot
Yeah.
faster than people are really ready for. So
Right.
And
One of my theory is that I think people will be paying for the kind of stuff that we know it's not coming from the AI, such as professional listener, for example, professional huggers, whatever. I know it sounds funny, but I would be surprised.
Yeah.
People now are so bad at listening. I think if we train to listen really well, show a lot of empathy, people might actually pay for it.
All right, there's hope for me. I might find a job one day as a hugger or a listener.
Hugger.
I love it.
well, Dan, I'm going to jump in and mark you kind of between on this the important one of traditional knowledge, though, which is on here. AI, of course, but this is the next 5 years. We are training the AI. We are teaching the AI. What are we teaching it? Right. And that's where traditional knowledge, other things, there's not any one way to manage something. There's multiple ways, right? And as we know, culturally, there's other ways that needs to be shared. And so like in fire suppression, we're looking at that right now is we've got all kinds of algorithms running on that landscape of how we would suppress that fire. Well, the Apache do it a certain way. There's all these different communities that will look at fire management differently, right? And so that AI that we're doing kind of becomes a cultural AI, I would argue. That's very important for us to understand. It's the filtering. And like with the Coeur d'Alene right now, we're working on this issue in particular. And the filters in particular that we're identifying that need to be held onto it is membership, stewardship, guardianship, spirituality, and scholarship. And if you have those 5 filters overlooking the landscape and you have those tools provided with you, then they feel a little stronger using this as a tool, right? But if it's a westernized AI that's used for forest management of the western wet white pine, you see where I'm going, right? It's going to displace natural environments. It's going to displace all kinds of things because it's only looking through the lens of a certain culture that is maybe not at the appropriate lens, right? And we know we're coming from a legacy of this, right? And so I do push back, I think, with the XR technologies as we do this, is that it is led by the children. It's going to be their future on it, children and elders, right? And then we start to train a new AI. It's a more cultural AI. It's something different. It's not a universal AI to some extent, but there are some things that can be captured culturally in traditional knowledge that I think is important.
I want to say I love this point, and I'm going to ask if maybe one of the things we can do as we wrap up, because this is also an extension or an outgrowth of Future Navigators, and I feel like it resonates a lot with Mark and John, what you were both just talking about, we have a project called Malama Mano, integrating ancestral intelligence with AI. Malama Mano is to care for the sharks. This project is, the research on this project and data collection on this project is going to happen in Papahanaumokuakea, right? The sacred northwestern Hawaiian Islands, the ancestral islands of Hawaii, this marine protected area. Sharks are considered to be ancestral, right? They were part of the family that helped bring the Polynesians to Hawaii, over 1,000 years ago. And so it's where Native Hawaiians believe ancestors travel into as they sort of transition from this life into the next. So it's very sort of a interesting opportunity, right, to say, what did we, I don't think those of us who are on the project, right, I have to sort of take the blame / credit for kind of coming up with that project name, but I had no idea really what I was fully doing when I came up with that name, because it ended up developing there's a lot of responsibility and opportunity that comes with saying, oh, we're going to integrate ancestral intelligence with artificial intelligence. And so from both of your perspectives, and of course, I'd love to hear from Keala or Jenny or Ko or Paige too, and thinking about like as we prepare in September, we're going to go out on what has historically and traditionally been seen as kind of a bastion of Western ocean science. It's the EV Nautilus, which is mapping the deep sea floor with a lot of funding from National Geographic, Ocean Exploration Trust. And we're this research project on board to go into those Northwest Hawaiian Islands, put some baited cameras right into the water at different depths and different locations, gather some video footage, and then have an AI system kind of help count and identify species within those ecosystems and analyze that footage. That's sort of the raw, basic kind of Western science dimensions of the project. And I know you're not like Hawaiian cultural advisors. That's not really what I'm asking for. But from a technical perspective, what are some of the interesting questions or lenses that we should be applying because I'm hoping a number of the future Navigators participants will also kind of engage in this project too. What are some of the things that we should be considering as we sort of deploy this technology for that purpose and in this space? And if you're like, I don't know, you can also just say, I don't know. But any thoughts?
I have an idea that. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh.
Sorry, I have a question. How long would this exploration take?
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, Keala, it's about a 3-week research cruise from Honolulu to get all the way to Lalo, which is French Frigate Atoll in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So it's a total of 3 weeks to get out there and back.
Oh, I see. We might break out, but it was just a random note for wondering how long it is. But and then I was wondering if Ko and I would we be able to have that would we be able to have the opportunity to be able to go on this exploration?
Oh yeah, I like it. Keala, we are hoping to bring part of my responsibility on that trip. I'm not sure I caught everything, but in terms of that question of how can you be a part, I don't have any spots I can sell or give away on the ship, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have been doling those out. But that's not my responsibility. But we are trying to figure out how, and this is one of the things I'll be asking future Navigators about, is how do we share this exploration and it's the intention and the lenses and the process. One of the things I'm hoping to learn from John and Mark is how can we bring that experience back to the Hawaiian Islands and back out to the world in a way that honors the sacredness of the whole thing, and the adventure of the whole thing, and the science of the whole thing, all of those things, and the technologies, the opportunities to learn with XR technologies and AI as well. But yeah, we're definitely want to figure out how to connect folks to it. And Keala, if you're interested, let's connect offline to figure out how you can be a part, and maybe we can engage in some cool stuff connecting Olovalu and West Maui with the stuff that we're doing out there in Papahanaumokuakea. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, it sounds really cool. So I hope you record a lot of the process. It would be cool to like see you go all the way from Oahu to one of the northern Hawaiian Islands, was it?
Yeah.
And I think it would be like a really cool process to maybe do like a time lapse of like between each islands, and then like a voiceover. That'd probably be like a really, really long time lapse, but I think it'd be really cool.
I love that idea of putting a little camera on the bow of the ship and just doing a time lapse of the whole journey. I think that's brilliant, and I might call on you to do the voiceover. You can do you can describe the whole journey. It'll be funny.
You have to give me a very descriptive script.
Oh, you just make it up. You just watch it and you just make it up as you go. No, I'm just kidding.
I could help make part of it.
Awesome. And you won't be surprised to learn that we will have a story map that's being generated from this. We'll hopefully have a VR space and XR kind of gallery and experience. And we have an app that we're hoping to be able to share the AI process and outcome so that people can kind of see into that and help us further train the AI, and learn about different shark species that way, and learn about the ecosystem that way as well. And so it's there hopefully will be lots of ways for everyone in Hawaii and beyond to engage, but I will continue to come to you for your ideas. And I want to, we are hitting 5 o'clock. I do want to honor Mark and John's time, and Paige and yours too, Keala and Jenny and Cole. But Mark and John, any reflections on this project, or things that we should be thinking about as we embark on this?
You know me, I've got a ton. My brain is just firing on all levels. So I love this. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate this. It's an honor to have this conversation. But Mark, yeah, I already see a project going here too. And then Dan, so if you're scanning sharks and kind of the story, what I like about this is, okay, we understand what shark is around in the water, everything else, but what is the ecosystems and what are the stories? So with the Coeur d'Alene again, coyote and the crane and the crow are important. Coyote in particular tells lots of, we have hundreds of coyote stories about coyote, which are stories about life and people. Well, the sharks, the fish, the crane, the eagle, you name the birds, the species, whatever's in that environment, and it does tell these stories that are traditional stories, at least in the Pacific Northwest, of how we talk about landscape. And I could almost see a data sensing project with looking at vegetation, looking at the animals, the flora and the fauna, if you will, and that is just telling stories, right? And it's creating animations and it's retelling that story again. And then at the same one, Mark, my mind's going, we do a quick solar and astrological map, and let's decode the map, right? There's all kinds of stories in the night sky that when you're out sailing and some other things, I'm sure are quite important to also be translated and captured, right? And all that could be embedded on that data. So that's kind of where my mind is right now, but it'll go in other areas too.
So I want to share an idea, a slightly futuristic idea, but technically it's possible. And have you guys heard of GPT-3? There's an OpenAI GPT-3 model. So you know how smart they are. In fact, I'm going to send a link to one of my conversations with GPT-3. It's not like stupid chat box. You can have a deep conversation with a computer today. And I know for some, if you know what to do, you should be able to I don't know if the AI part is open source or not. When something like this becomes available, what you could do is to build our own GPT-3-like brain trained by, say, your favorite Kumu or a group of Kumu, for example, so that people in the future generation can talk to that person as if, I don't know, like AI, but that totally sounds like a person, somebody you revere. Also, you could train the AI by humans who know the shark, so that you can talk to AI who could talk to you or answer questions as if you're talking to a shark in human language.
Oh, I love this. So we're gonna have the shark AI is going to be a blend of talking with sharks and talking with the ancestors, or the shark kumu, or the they call kahu mano, and oh my gosh, we're gonna
you
have
could
to
you could also use the Hawaiian mythology as input data.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As input data for sure. So, just like John was talking about.
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys just got yourselves some jobs on this project, and like I said, I wish I could dole out spots on the ship because I'd invite all of you. But man, this is a cool, like, understanding how to bring our kumu. You know, like John was talking about. You know, like who's training the AI? Well, what if our AI is being trained by our wisest people, right? What if the not like the most technically adept are the ones who have access to the technology, or the ones who, but what if we are identifying who are the people who could actually help you understand what it's like to be a shark that's also an ancestor? It's like, whoa, that's a trip. And at the very least, people would have fun talking to it online. They would chat with it, even if it's like, oh, we're not going to let it help us make any decisions. But then maybe we'll like elect the AI for president, and it'll be like some elder kumu shaman shark AI for president. I would vote for them, the best candidate I've seen in a while. So I think, oh man, this is
it could be also have fun to have like role playing games among kids. For example, you play the role as a kid, a shark, and then you have to pretend that you're a shark. And then other people ask him or her the question, you have to answer the question, right?
I love it.
Or if you go to the ocean and you see a shark, instead of saying, oh, that's a shark, oh, pretty. But you could say, oh, what would the shark say to me? Tell me if I were the shark right now.
Mark, I don't
write
know
those things down.
I know John and Paige and Jenny all know that I have a deep interest and a little bit of some experience in biomimicry, right? Innovation inspired by nature. But this sort of thinking is sort of at the heart of why I actually like biomimicry. I'm not a big inventor, you know, that's not necessarily, I do like to invent things, but it's not necessarily my full intention. But it's just that I love nature and I try to think like nature as much as possible. And so this whole concept, right, that you guys are helping cook up, I think this is, I'm glad I asked, because I think this is what I should have meant when I came up with the title for the project. And I think it's finally coming together and just in time. So I love it.
Well, the other one to throw on the table there, Dan, and you're familiar with some of the salmon sim, and I'm linking a lot of that same one is how the scientific data that we're generating, though, does look different when you change the point of view into a shark or a salmon, not a human. And suddenly people look at turbidity or acidity in the water. They look at speciation. They look at all the development. They look at erosion, red tide. You know, I'm glad to hear it's not an issue, but suddenly when that is a part of your daily life and a part of your community, and you're trying to take care of your community, which is a non-human, which we can debate, you know, to me, it's the full circle. We're all part of that same family anyway, right? But that story can take place there where a lot of people can't make that leap in today's world because they only can look at through the point of view of a human, right? And I think jumping back into elders and into our animal elders as well is an important story because it changes the way science looks.
I mean, I'm just thinking about those salmon for generations kept out of the creek, you know, and Hangman's Creek, and thinking about, you know, wow, how to not be able to find your way to the only place in your DNA that's stored there, and your like fundamental reason for existing is to be able to get back to that spot, and to not be able to find your way back there. How and I don't want to, you know, anthropomorphize too much, but to have that be their existence, that their reason for being is literally stolen because of things like the turbidity of the water, or things like obstacles, you know, like dams that are created so that they no longer have the same signals to respond to, and that those were taken away in a matter of a generation, right? And that's also true of human culture. The same things have happened to that, but to think of both or all of life is really, really kind of beautiful. Yes, this is really for future navigators, for Malamo Mano, for just my work and understanding generally. I certainly hope we get a lot of people watch this recording. I'm gonna try to push folks to do it, because you guys are really, really kind of blowing my mind as usual. Every time I've gotten to hang out with John and Mark a few times, and every time it's like this, but I'm glad we get to share it. And Jenny and Keala and Koa and Paige, I'm glad you guys are here in person. And for those of you who are watching this recording, good on you, because I know you're also going like, oh, I never thought about it like that. It's really cool. So super excited. And I see Keala's hand up. Keala, you want to wrap us up?
It's kind of a comment on like the sharks with how they treat the environment. Sorry, I don't remember your question.
Well, we're driving to a graduation party right now, I'll be honest. The families that we're from, but what I'm like, it's Malama Mono, how do the Mono Malama, you know, like, how are they caring, you know, for, you know, if it's an ancestor, how do they care, and how do they show by example? And I just asked Kayla what that looks like.
I love that.
So I was asking her.
I love that. To me, it reminds me of those lenses that John shared. It's a beautiful question, because what if the AI is trained to really help you see the perspective of the shark and absorb those lessons and really seek advice and understand how sharks are not out to be man-eating monsters, but that actually they are constantly taking care of our ecosystem and our environment and playing this sort of vital role in maintaining the health and balance of that ecology, and changing our attitude towards large predators in general globally is an objective of the project. So we really are hoping that people identify who are these creatures that have been kind of demonized and maybe don't even exist in your community anymore, like wolves or coyotes or bears, because they've been driven out over time, over the last several generations by people, because it's hard to live with them. And I mean, it's a really, really beautiful and critical idea. Yeah, Keala.
Yeah, I also think that, sorry, I'll go real quick just because I'll lose my thought by driving into everything. But it's like, what about if it's honored instead of like, you know, villainized? Like same with Kapuna, you know, like, do you center stage and take care of, you know, the elders in your community and honor their wisdom? Or do you not honor it and make it into something that's like, you know, something to be feared, like, you know, of like, oh, I'm gonna get old and the body's not gonna work, and then, you know, like, what do you do with that? But what's the difference when you actually honor something and take, like, what are they trying to show us? And, you know, how come they've been around for so long? They must be doing something right? So,
I love it.
the shark and the kapuna, sure.
That's
Sorry.
right. Same.
I was gonna say something kind of similar to Mom. I think I have two things to say, but I feel like in Mom's talked with us about this, in a lot in movies they villainize sharks. But for example, Sharknado, Jaws is very popular. I know it's not exactly a shark; it's a different species. They look like sharks, the megalodon or the man. I can't remember, but they have like a lot of documentaries or movies where they villainize the sharks and they make them look like big, scary, completely harmless. And we're the people who's like, just like, I don't know, killing them off. Like there's for example, in Turtle Bay, there's this ledge with two white-tipped reef sharks, and they'll just swim around. They don't do anything. Or Turtle Canyon, sorry. And they'll just swim around, and then they'll go under the ledge, and they just do their thing. They don't bother you. They're just there, and they're quite fascinating to admire and to look.
They are. You're right, Cal. I love that. I think that's it's an important part of this story, right? Is that how do we foster a respect and a valuing and an honoring, right, of all of life. And for this particular project, it's sharks and the life that supports them and that they support in return. And there's a lot of stories of aloha, right, of reciprocity, of exchange, of balance, that I think we can learn a lot from. So I love this. It is a little futuristic, but I can feel ways, Mark, where like, you know, that we could play around with the interface that we develop in the app, and also really think about what some of the inputs into this interface are, you know, going back to John, your points about those lenses and who's training this, and really think about how can Kumu, how can Kahumano, how can people, we do have a great, a family that comes from a lineage of Kahumano, shark priests, shark caretakers. Kaikea Nakachi has this database. Mark, I think I was telling you about it when we met. He's documented 60 different tiger sharks along the Kona coast by free diving and scuba diving with them, and photographing them. And so now he has terabytes of data on the tiger sharks of the Big Island. And he just got his master's degree from UH Hilo, and his thesis is all written about this project that he's done. And I asked Kaikea to be an advisor to our project. I did actually try to get him an actual spot on board the ship as kind of our cultural advisor. So I haven't heard back yet if Kaikea is going to be able to come. But you know, that's exactly like, oh, I already know. I wish Kaikea was here. I should have invited him, because I might send this recording to him too and just say, hey, listen to the last 20 minutes and tell, you know, what do you think? Can we talk? Because our AI team is actually out of Oxford, and I think is brilliant and will do a great job. And Sarah El Khalid comes from, you know, it's a brilliant woman, AI developer, computer scientist, from you know, marginalized communities, who is going to really, I think, hear this idea and go, oh my gosh, we have to do this. This is fundamentally has to happen. And so I'm really excited that we had this, I asked the question and we had this final conversation. And I'm sorry if we kept everybody too late, but it was just the right time for me. Now I'm all fired up. So yeah, exactly. I'm all fired up. It's a good way to end. Who wants to offer a final word? Paige, we haven't gotten to hear enough from you today.
Yeah, usually I'm peppering you with Western questions.
Not true.
No, I'm really excited. I'm sorry I missed the first part, and you know, I've been kind of daydreaming about ways that we could use these tools and technologies. So looking forward to the recording, and I wish we could have more conversations like this.
Yeah, this was really, really good. Me too.